This afternoon, I'm in LOANHEAD in the Lothian constituency, campaigning for my good friend and colleague Charlotte Morley, who, of all the candidates that we are fielding, would perhaps be of the greatest use to the Scottish Parliament. As a forensic and brilliant young lawyer, she's exactly what we need when we open the books, as it is our intention to do. I'm in LOANHEAD, visiting and paying my respects at the Miners' Memorial. The true cost of coal is calibrated on this memorial. The true cost paid by 10 generations of miners in this area, miners for coal, that fueled the industry, that made Scotland the workshop of the world, its produce sailing the seven seas in the finest ships that man could build. Two subjects to which I shall return. But first, I want to say that in a long life, and quite a successful one, by the grace of God, I have collected many valuable things, but one of the most valuable is my honorary membership of the National Union of Mine Workers. South Wales area, Mardy Lodge in particular, which I was honored to be given back in 1982. Don't tell the wife, but that's how long I have been fighting for working class people, and longer even than that. In 1982, I became one of that fellowship of men that was the Miners' Union. And the true cost of coal measures the number of men, 30, 42, 50, 46 men who were killed in pit accidents just in the Midlothian area, mainly at Bilston Glen, one of the great powerhouses of the Scottish and the British Industrial Revolution. That fellowship is one of the reasons why I am proud to be a unionist. I joined the Transport and General Workers Union on Christmas Eve in 1973, when I was still a teenager and working in the Michelin tire plant in my home city of Dundee. And I've been a trade unionist ever since. And I'm a trade unionist for the same reason that I'm a unionist. Unity is strength. United we stand. Divided we fall. When these pit accidents were taking place in Bilston Glen, nobody asked where the miner next to you came from, how he voted, which football team he supported, which religion he professed. They were united because they were miners. They were united because they were workers. They were united because they were stronger united. They knew that. They knew it before 1945, when they were facing the private coal owners, and they knew it after 1945, when they were defending their communities and their industry in the teeth of governments that wanted to close them down, thin them out, and didn't care keenly enough about the safety of the men that were miles underground, hewing the coal, that fueled the power stations, that kept our country as a first-rate industrial power. Nobody asked the miner next to them whether they wanted to be separate from the miners in Northumberland, the miners in Yorkshire, the miners in Kent, the miners in South Wales. Nobody asked them because it would have been a ludicrous question. Because of all the people who know the value of unity, of union, of being together, shoulder to shoulder, miners know it, workers know it. I have been an activist, a militant in the working class movement all of my life. And I will die as a militant activist of the working class movement. I believe in the working people of this country. I believe that they can and have achieved great things, and with the correct leadership will do so in the future, long after I am gone. But I am united with people of very different political stripe in this great alliance that we have built here in Scotland. And there's nothing, of course, unusual about that. Mr. Bevan didn't think twice before serving in the cabinet with Mr. Churchill. Mr. Attlee, Major Attlee of Haileybury, he did not think twice before accepting the invitation to be a part of a national unity government, because the enemy that was at the gates was far more dangerous to the working people of Britain than any difference of opinion. Even with Winston Churchill, whose role in so many episodes involving the working class movement in Scotland, in Wales, and across this country had been so very bad. It couldn't be as bad as Hitler. It couldn't be as bad as an invasion by Nazis. It couldn't be as bad as the total destruction of everything that our people had built over so many generations. No, all of the working class leaders, Bevan, Attlee, Bevan, all of them stood shoulder to shoulder with others of different class, of different politics, against the common enemy. And that's what I'm doing here with the Alliance for Unity. We are all for unity for different reasons, maybe. I'm not myself a part of the communities that have a different reason for their allegiance to Britain. I believe in Britain because I believe it's the best unit, it's the best critical mass of 65 million people that can make our people more prosperous, that can divide our wealth more fairly, because that's what I believe in, that's what my politics are. We here in Scotland are far better off because of the union. It's not about flags for me. It's not about sentimentality even for me, though I can be sentimental about the great things that we did as a country. It's about the value of the solidarity that the union represents. And if you want to put pounds, shillings and pence on it, Scotland receives £2,400 a year more per head of population. Every Scotsman, every Scotswoman, every Scottish child is receiving thousands of pounds more per head per year than is being spent by the government in other parts of the United Kingdom. Now, there are good reasons for that. I'm one of the people that fought for that in nearly 30 years in the British Parliament in London. I'm one of the people that argued our case with Lord Barnett, Joe Barnett, Lord Barnett, as he became. I knew him well. I used to often have breakfast with him. He was very proud of his Barnett formula, which is the formula by which we receive so much more, thousands more, than anyone else in Britain. Do you think we could have a health service free in Scotland if we were to wrench our country out of a union of 66 million people? Don't be silly if you do. How could we? Scotland has a deficit of 8 times more than the European Union deficit that is permitted for countries that join the European Union. So if Nicola Sturgeon were to succeed, let's imagine it, she were to succeed in ripping Scotland out of one union, persuading people in another union to allow her in, 7/8 of our public expenditure would have to be axed, destroyed, in order to meet the convergence criteria for joining the European Union. So how could we have a health service? How could we have a police service? How could we have all the public services that we need and need more of? How could we possibly have that in a country of 5 million people, half of whom don't pay tax? Get your head around that. Half of a country of 5 million people don't pay tax. And half of the other half are working and being paid by the taxes of others in that half that pay tax. Working in local government, working in the health service, working for national government, working for the Ministry of Defence. Just think about that. Half of us don't pay tax. Half of the rest of us are paid for by other people's tax. How could we possibly have even the life that we have now, which is not nearly the life that we deserve and that I fight for in my day job as the leader of the Workers' Party of Britain? Our living standards would be devastated if Nicola Sturgeon got her way. As a matter of fact, in 14 years of SNP government, Scotland has already gone miles backwards by any metric. Our schools are worse. Our health service is worse. Our roads are worse. Our education is now performing so poorly that when the OECD drew up a report on the outcomes in Scottish education, the SNP government locked it up until after the election so you couldn't see it. That's how bad it is. Scottish law, of which we used to be so proud, now is such that it has become a byword for malicious prosecution of individuals targeted by politicians. Imagine what a country to be in, where the government's enemies become the police's enemies, and the government's enemies become the prosecution service's enemies. Ask Alex Salmond about that. If you don't believe me, the SNP conspired to put Alex Salmond behind bars for the rest of his life. He's the same age as me and not nearly in such good condition. He would never have come out. That's what the SNP did to their own former leader, the former First Minister, using the prosecution authorities and the police to do so. Never mind Alex Salmond. What about the Rangers administrators? You think Alex Salmond's prosecution was expensive? Wait till you hear this. The Crown Office has admitted to having maliciously prosecuted the administrators of Rangers Football Club. And it's already had to compensate just one of them £24 million. That's big money. £24 million for one of them. There's 7 of them. 6 more coming down the pipe. Do the maths. Even if you were educated in Nicola Sturgeon, Scotland, you can do those maths. We are in for £100 million, at least, in compensation to people that were maliciously prosecuted. Their words, not mine, by the Crown Office working for Nicola Sturgeon's government. I could go on. In fact, I could go on all day. My wife says sometimes I do go on all day. Let me just turn back to the point I made right at the beginning. The men who dug the coal here did so to fuel our industrial revolution, which made us a powerhouse in the world. Thank you. Which made us something in the world, something beyond our size. Made in Britain, made in Scotland, was something to be. We who built ships of steel when the Americans were still cowboys riding the range, now cannot build ferries to ferry people to and from our own islands. 2 ferries. 2 ferries which cost us now and counting £359 million. Years late and still not sailing and never sailing. That's my prediction. They'll never sail. They're the wrong size. The hull is flawed. And as for the windows that have been painted on them, well, at least we can still paint windows. But we can't build ships under the SNP. You know that Ferguson's shipyard was already £100 million in debt when the SNP nationalised them. They were the highest bidders for these 2 ferries, but they got the gig. And by the way, most of the people working in the yard are Romanians, Romanian shipbuilders, not Scottish. This miserable story of 14 years of pathetic misgovernment by Miss Sturgeon has got to come to an end. Now, if Charlotte Morley and I are elected to Holyrood next Thursday, we'll go through them like a dose of salts. I'm bringing with me the stiffest of brooms and a forensic accountant and the legal eagle Charlotte Morley, and we are going to open the books. And it will be difficult to know where to start. We'll certainly not know where to finish. And I'm going to close with some breaking news for you. It's the biggest, it's the worst of them all. A dodgy Indian entrepreneur called Gupta is in to your pocket for £750 million. £750 million of your money is already legally committed to him. Mr. Gupta, about whom no one did any due diligence, because if they had, they would have known just how dodgy he was. But they gave him a 115,000 acre Highland hunting estate They gave him £7 million to start smelting, and they signed a contract in your name to pay his bills for electricity to the value of £750 million. An unbreakable contract. And he hasn't smelted an ounce of aluminium. He may have shot some choice game on the estate that we gave him, though he doesn't look much like a hunting, shooting, and fishing fellow to me. But it all happened at your expense on Nicola Sturgeon's watch. And if you think the Rangers administrators, the Alex Salmond affair, the Derek Mackay affair, sex texting children, schoolboys, whilst a minister in the Scottish government, I've got a son, nearly the age of the schoolboy that the Scottish Minister of Finance was stalking by text, sext texts. And I tell you this, if I'd been the father of that boy and I got my hands on Derek Mackay, the result would not have been pretty. Imagine the Minister of Finance in Nicola Sturgeon's government. And then there's the fumbling, fondling, fingering going on in the whip's office of the SNP in Westminster. I could talk to you about SNP scandals for the rest of this day and still not have enough time. But I'm here to tell you, if you think those scandals were big, and they were, you ain't seen nothing yet. Because this Gupta affair will lead to people behind bars. It must lead to people behind bars. How could it not lead to people behind bars? $750 million to a dodgy Indian businessman at your expense. How could that not lead to prosecutions? Well, it certainly will lead to prosecutions if I'm in Holyrood, if I'm elected next Thursday. It certainly will lead to prosecutions if next Thursday Charlotte Morley is returned. Thank you very much for watching here in LOANHEAD. Long live the miners! Long live the Miners' Union!